Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're tuning in. This is our final episode of the 2024 season of Tailgate Trash Talk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. I got Bentley with me, and before we get to your intro, we have a special little clip we want to share here because we tend to give a lot of takes on this show, and that's a podcast thing, that's a sports talk thing. And every so often we kind of nail something. And from week to week, we like to highlight the things we got right. We also like to jab each other with the things we got wrong. But not always do you get to call your shot 4 months before it happens. So, or 5 months actually before it happens. But on this show, we did have somebody call their shot, and we did have somebody stand by their take the entire season, even after the loss to Michigan, even after the no-show in the Big Ten championship because of that loss to Michigan, and even after they were matched up with Oregon in the second round. Mr. Bentley Winstead called his shot, and we're going to play it here for you because we've got the video evidence.
So I have some teams that could probably win it, but I'm going to give you my actual pick first, right? I'm going to pick Ohio State.
And lo and behold, bud, Monday night, Ohio State finished the fucking deed. Take your victory lap, bud.
Yeah, you said it very aptly, right? We give a lot of takes, we say a lot of things, and I get things wrong often. There are many things on this show that I say that do not come to fruition, but that one did, right? I know that maybe preseason it was not necessarily a hot take to pick Ohio State to win the national title. You look at that roster, everybody likes to say the $20 million roster, but all right, cool. Where were you when they lost to Michigan, right? Where were you when they lost to Ohio or to Oregon, right? Where were you when they were struggling to beat Nebraska? Like, I came on the show and I stood on my take. I stood by it. I said I'm still going to take Ohio State to win the national championship. And if you go back and look at my bracket, it reflects it. I picked every game correctly except for the Penn State Boise, and that was really more of like a passion pick, but whatever. When it was nut crunch time, I picked Ohio State and I believed it all the way through, and it ended up happening. Now, we can get into the game here in a little bit, but they almost Ryan Dayed. They almost shook this one away. They tried a little bit in the second half, but
that pucker factor was real in the second half.
It was tight. My wallet was screaming at me a little bit, like, "Hey, bud, what are we doing?" But yeah, it's cool. It's cool to look back 5 months to something that I said, and I turned out to be right. It was. That's a good feeling. You don't get a lot of those in sports because things they're tough to predict, and there's a lot of factors that go into it, right? Injuries could have played a big factor, and certainly they did with the offensive line at Ohio State, but it's just cool. It's fun to see something like that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, actually, not to spoil kind of one of the things we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but Penn State does have a pretty solid returning class, returning their quarterback and their top two running backs. And I mentioned a week or two ago on one of the shows that they have some wide receivers coming in, some underclassmen wide receivers. So Penn State, they're going to continue to be a formidable team. It's just a matter of whether they can get over that hump. And we're going to talk about it here in a moment. We're going to talk they're way too early. Top 25 here. We're going to talk a little bit and way too early championship picks. But Penn State is one of the schools that does have a very solid class coming back in terms of being able to return important starters, but also some of the incoming underclassmen. So they are losing some pieces. Everybody loses pieces every year, but it does look like Penn State's going to return quite a bit of what they had this year as a national semifinalist. So, but yeah, let's talk about it though. So Ohio State jumps out early. I take that back.
Notre Dame
got out early and scored first, but then Ohio State kind of bum rushed them to end the first half. And I'm going to be honest. I thought Marcus Freeman was about to slip up and just say, "I don't know," when he got asked what they needed to fix at halftime, because he looked like a guy who was kind of shell shocked by what happened after that opening drive. The opening drive, Riley Leonard, he had like 9 runs or 10 runs on an 18-play touchdown drive, and then threw up on the sideline. And I know you and I joked about it. I joked about it in another group chat. Like, he's going to throw up in the fucking end zone when he punches this in for a touchdown, because he was dogged by the end of that drive. And of course, like, he was the focus of that drive. But I'm going to go back to something you said at the end of that drive, because I said I didn't have Notre Dame bullying Ohio State on my bingo card, right? I didn't expect that on any of the drives. I even said last week, like, the only path I see is a non-offensive score. So to see them kind of do that on an opening drive was a bit surprising. Now, you said, and I quote, that won't continue, right? They won't be able to keep it up. And that's what we saw for the rest of the first half. So Ohio State goes into the locker room up 2 touchdowns and huge. And then they end up 24 at one point in the third quarter. And then we see Notre Dame just like bounces kind of go their way. They get down there. They score a touchdown on a good drive. Riley Leonard throws a touchdown, get a 2-point conversion. But then you get the fumble. And Notre Dame goes right back down the field, scores a touchdown, gets 2. And you start to think, like, is Ohio State going to choke this thing away because they're being too conservative? We talked a little bit one-on-one about like play calling and play in decision making that Ohio State was going through in the second half, and you don't know right at that point, because there is the Ryan Day factor and what are we doing here? But Ohio State buckles down. They get to a 3rd and 9, and they go to the best freshman maybe we've ever seen in J.J. Smith. 3rd and 9, they get 40, I think it was 49 yards, I believe, on that completion. Get down, kick a field goal, and really kind of put this thing on ice. So important field goal, though, for a lot of folks out there. If you had laid 8.5 or 9, a little bit of a wiggle, 8.5 and 9, not much movement, but did see 9 on some books and 8.5 on most books. If you had taken it at 8.5 or 9, it was 8. It was 8 points there, right? So like that was an important number for a lot of folks, yourself included, because you said you doubled down early in the game to get more skin in the game with Ohio State. So, but Ohio State holds on, man. In a season filled with turmoil, in a season where people probably wanted Ryan Day fired, at the moment the fucking final whistle happened in the Michigan game, they go on to win a national title. I want to pass it your way to talk a little bit about the game, but also talk to me a little bit about, like, how do we calm Ohio State fans down after they won a national title, but that's 1,100 days. It's going to end up being about 1,200 days since they last beat Michigan. Talk the people down, the people who love this, talk them down off the ledge of trying to fire a Ryan Day.
You got a trophy, dude. Last I checked, they don't give out a trophy for beating Michigan. It's an awesome rivalry. I get it. There is nothing better in sports than college rivalry games, whether they be basketball or football. But even like the Palmetto Bowl between South Carolina and Clemson gives out a trophy. You know what I'm saying? The Mayor's Bowl between South Carolina and Missouri gives out a trophy. Like the Apple Cup has a trophy. I believe Minnesota Wisconsin game has a trophy. They play for the Golden Axe, I think. Like all these games have trophies. Michigan Ohio State doesn't have a trophy, last I checked. But now Ohio State has a national championship, and they finished the deal. I think that next year Ohio State probably wipes the floor with Michigan, because a lot of the pressure that Ryan Day has felt, the 4 previous coaches before him who coached at Ohio State all won national titles. It's the same thing that Brian Kelly is kind of dealing with down at LSU right now. The 3 guys before him all won national titles there. But now that pressure is off Ryan Day, I think that he now has the freedom to just kind of coach because he loves it at this point, right? I said it previously, and you agreed with me. We touched on it. We're talking about Deion going to the Cowboys. These guys are uber competitive, so it's not as though the competitive fire is now gone from Ryan Day, but he the monkey is sort of off of his back in the college football sphere, but within that Columbus-Michigan rivalry, the pressure is still there a little bit. But I think this alleviates a lot of that, and he can go, hey, your coach that won a national title just had a shitload of penalties rain down on you and jumped ship for the NFL. I'm still here, and I have a national title now. Like, I think they'll be fine, absolutely fine going forward. They always recruited high level. They've always recruited better than Michigan. I know Michigan fans are not going to want to hear that, but Ohio State is just a better football program than is the Maize and Blue. Like, they just objectively are. I get that Michigan's won more games than any other program, but they've also been playing forever, right? But if you look in the last 35 years, it's been Ohio State that's been better than Michigan. And I don't see any reason, especially with the pressure off of Ryan Day now, why that would change going forward, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
so
you won a national title.
Yeah, like, you're good, bud. You're good. I again, and now I can go back to hating Ohio State, right? Hate the Big Ten, all the teams in it. But, like, I will say, and Herbie, say what you want about Herbie. Some people don't like him. I really like Herbie.
If you don't like Herbie, you're wrong.
Yeah.
I'll say it.
Or you just hate the SEC, one of the two.
Yeah.
Herbie, obviously very closely aligned with the school there, Ohio State.
Bentley's a Commanders fan too, Robert.
Yeah, dude. Let's go, baby.
Yeah. We got the JD5
on. Speaking of that, I saw a guy today in a building where I was for a conference wearing a Sonny Jurgensen jersey.
Yo. Shout out that guy.
Yep.
Yes.
I saw a JD5 jersey. I could not believe it. A JD5 jersey and a Sonny Jurgensen 9 jersey.
Let's go.
It's crazy. But no, so Ryan Day, I sympathize for him. And just kind of like to reiterate what Herbie said, like, he was as down as could be after that Michigan game. 4th loss in a row. Yeah. I've been in the trenches of the online world whenever you lose a rivalry game like that. I can only imagine what he was dealing with, his family, his kid. Like, I know it had to be just some vile things that were being thrown his direction. And these games mean a lot to folks like you and I, and they mean a lot to the student body and the fans and like the donors and stuff. But at the end of the day, it is a sport, right? And it's not worth a life-threatening message or something like that, right? Which I just wanted to put that in perspective and say that I did feel bad for him in the moment, like just kind of understanding a slight glimpse of maybe what he went through. And now I feel good that he can wave that fucking title in everybody's face and say, fuck you guys, I won a national title. I win, right? Like, you guys have to go back to your normal jobs and normal lives and root for the team that I still coach because I won a national title.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, the lunatic fringe can take a chill pill. As Herbie calls them, the lunatic fringe. It's a great reference, and I'll never get it out of my head. I will steal that going forward for any fan base, and we're going to talk about the Ravens here in a moment on the Blitz and what they're doing to fucking Mark Andrews. Like, that's lunatic fringe stuff.
Yeah,
for sure.
That was bad stuff. The game. Let me talk about the game real fast. So we mentioned, obviously, the 18-play drive, 75 yards, 9 carries for Riley Leonard. Fantastic. Neither of us saw that coming out.
The first quarter was over before you blinked.
Yeah, that was insane. Neither of us really expected that to happen, so it caught us by surprise. But, Gary, the following 9 possessions of the game, Ohio State outgained Notre Dame 310-11 over the following 9 possessions of that game.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, Notre Dame goes down and scores a touchdown, cuts it to 16. You get the fumble by Ibuka, which was the only turnover of the game, I might add. So it was a very cleanly played game on both sides. It was just pure domination from one than the other. Yep. You get that fumble from Emeka Ibuka, sorry. Embiid jumped in my head for some reason. I don't know why.
Listen, close.
Yeah. Emeka Ibuka fumbles the ball, and you're like, oh my God, like, is this the Notre Dame Magic? Like,
the luck of the Irish?
Yeah, because you think back, right? 17 points in 27 seconds against Georgia. A weird fumble in the low red for Georgia. They allowed them to score at the beginning, and like right at the end of the first half. You're thinking, oh my God, like, could this happen again? And then Greathouse makes a phenomenal play. Who, by the way, Greathouse, I know that Faison is probably their best receiver, the two-sport athlete there for Notre Dame, but Greathouse
was awesome.
That kid might be really good next year.
He's got size too.
Yeah,
man. He reminds me of what like Chase Claypool was when he was at Notre Dame. Now, very different person than Chase Claypool. Seems that way. I don't know a whole lot about him, but from what I've seen, especially during the playoff, I think he's got a chance to be a dude.
Yeah.
For a school that's been starved for a good wide receiver for a long time.
Yeah. So we get them cutting it to 8, right? And then they get the ball back. They go all the way back down the field, and they have the first and goal from I believe it was from the 6.
Yeah.
And here is where my biggest gripe with Notre Dame, and it's not going to be the field goal. That's not going to be my gripe. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking they're down at that point. I guess they were down 16. So like, why would you kick a field goal to go from 16 to 13? Whatever. And then Mitch Jeter, who forgot everything he learned at South Carolina, doinks the kick, whatever. My gripe
I hate kicking to go from 2 scores to 2 scores, though. I will get that out there right now.
Sure, absolutely. In most cases, I would totally agree with you. But I can play devil's advocate to the other side is why he would kick it, right? But again, my biggest gripe in this game. Let me pull up the number so I know it for sure, so I'm not speaking out of the wrong side of my mouth. Gary, if I were to ask you who the best offensive player on Notre Dame's roster is, would you? Okay, so you would agree with me. I would also say Jeremiah Love. Do you know how many carries he got in this game? Just off the top of your head.
It wasn't 7.
He got 4 carries for 3 yards.
4?
4 carries.
I knew it wasn't many, and I knew he was held in check, but they got behind so quickly after that first drive that, 4, huh?
4.
I knew it was low. That's not enough.
I agree. 100% agree. We talked on this game or on this show prior to the game. What was the path for victory for Notre Dame? It was a defensive score, and then you run the ball to take the air out of it and shorten the game, right?
Yep.
If your best offensive player, because Jeremiah Love is a better player than is Riley Leonard, just objectively, right?
Yep.
If your best player is only touching the ball 6 times in total for the game, and he's a running back who only gets 4 carries, I got to question the game plan there. Like, what are we doing? You got first and goal to 6. You should hand that ball off to Jeremiah Love at least 4 times in a row.
Yeah, at least twice.
Yeah.
And maybe use them on a play action if you got 3rd down or something. But not a good.
I did not understand that side of the Notre Dame game plan, right? You want to talk about injury, whatever.
Unless you told me he was more hurt than he said he was, because he said he would be all right.
Sure. But we also said that he was going to be hurt going into the Georgia game. And you remember that 3-yard touchdown run he had in Georgia where they fucking dove into his knee
to stay up? Yeah.
Now, maybe something got aggravated. I don't know. But, it's the last game of the year, dog. This is the championship game. You leave it all on the field.
Yeah.
So I did not understand, and that was my biggest gripe with Notre Dame, is why they did not get him involved more, especially early. When I get that Notre Dame can pour it on quick. I understand that. But to counteract that, you have to possess the ball. You know what I mean? So the best way to do that is to give the ball to your best running back and try to create positive yards with him. And they didn't do that. Down 7, down 14, down 21, whatever. At no point did they try to get him involved heavily in the offensive scheme. Now, to your point of you hate kicking down 16 to go 13. Totally agree. What I think happened was Marcus Freeman watched his team have a first and goal from the 6 and go backwards 2 yards in 3 plays and thought to himself, I still need 2 touchdowns and 2 2-point conversions. What are the odds that I'm going to get 2 2-point conversions against this defense?
Yeah.
Because you still have to get the 2 stops regardless. So if you cut it to 13, then 2 touchdowns and 2 PATs win you the game.
Yeah, I think that's fair, right? But my counterpoint to that is you go for it on 4th and 8. If you don't get it, it's still 2 touchdowns, right? And 2 2-point conversions. If you go for it and don't get it, you've got to make a stop either way. Even if you kick it, you've still got to make the same number of stops. I understand the complication of the 2 2-point conversions, 100%. I think it has a lot more to do with what you said, where they went backwards 2 yards and Marcus Freeman was like, I'm not going to try to get 8 yards here. I'm going to try to get 3 points. And then you're looking at 2 touchdowns and you kick the extra points. I do understand that logic of it. I hate in that with that much time left in that scenario, I hate the field goal to go from 2 scores to 2 scores. That's just the biggest thing for me. But I definitely understand what you said, right? He probably looked at it. We've just gone backwards 2 yards on 3 plays. Maybe we try to kick this thing. We've got a reliable kicker, right? You know, Mitch Jeter, when healthy, is one of, if not the best kicker in college football. He's unfortunately just not on that one.
Yeah. And they ended up, like, ultimately didn't matter, right? Because they couldn't stop Ohio State on the final possession, or on Ohio State's final possession. And so, like, obviously, right, 2020 hindsight, but they did get that first stop, right? And they cut it to 8.
Yeah.
So if Mitch Jeter makes that field goal, they cut it to 8, or they cut it to 13. They get the stop, they get the touchdown. Now it's a 5-point game, and you only need to score a touchdown to win the game, right?
Yeah.
And then Al Golden has called incredible defenses all year long. They're obviously extremely talented. I like Gray, the guy who got beat, I think is a phenomenal cornerback. Like, he's going to be fine long term. He's a guy that'll probably play in the league. Asking a single cornerback to play Jeremiah Smith on an island to the wide side of the field
without safety help,
because you want to call a zero blitz, that's tough, especially when the pressure doesn't get
I'm
there.
telling you right now, if Chip Kelly wasn't in Will Howard's ear, Will Howard was in his own ear, that, like, the moment those safeties get near the line of scrimmage, I know I'm just going to throw it to JJ. JJ's down there somewhere.
Yep. Yeah, and I mean that, like, is it third and 9? Oh, they don't have the yardage.
I think it was a third and 9.
It was a third and 9. Yeah.
Okay.
It was a third and 11, excuse me, because they had done
11.
They had done the weird thing where they just ran Will Howard twice instead of giving it to one of their 2 running backs.
Didn't understand that either. But
yeah, I get, like, if you want to not take the chance of a fumble on, like, the handoff or whatever, but, like, just execute the play. Just give the ball to Trevion
5,000 times throughout the course of a season. Hand it off. Hand it off to one of them fucking racehorses.
Yep. But they decide to not, right? And they run the 2 quarterback draws back to back. They get the 3rd and 11, and they leave JJ Smith wide by himself with a single back, and he's playing very smartly. So he's playing off coverage, right? It's 3rd and 11. You're not going to press on that. You're by yourself. There's nobody over the top. But, like, JJ just runs a perfect route, right? He kind of bends it into the side, and then he swerves that corner, whoa, and breaks it out to the outside, and he's wide open by 15 yards. And a better throw, I think he probably scores there, honestly. I mean,
sure.
15 yards may have been a stretch. He was open by at least 4 or 5. But if Will Howard puts that ball on him, I mean, JJ's walking into the end zone for his 2nd score of the night.
Yep. And
we're singing, Kumbaya till the cows come home.
Or Happy Doolah, as Jay Gruden would say.
Yeah, Happy Doolah. All the way to the bank.
Yeah, buddy.
Overall, I thought it was a pretty engaging game, right? It was trending towards a blowout.
Yep.
And then Ohio State got a little bit conservative with their offensive play calling. Ibuka fumbles the ball, which he really never does. You even saw him over on the sideline. Like, he was unfazed by that. I think it was one of the coaches, or maybe even a player sitting next to him. They showed it on screen. They were like, "Yo, are you good?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, I'm fine. Like, it's all good. We got this. No worries." Yeah, right. The Ohio State defense really buckled down after that first drive. Jack Sawyer and Triple T and those boys on the backside, really, they tightened up. I will say the DBs for Ohio State did not. The corners specifically did not have a great day.
Agreed.
Desert Ward was a little loose in coverage, not fantastic. And the kid on the other side, whose name I'm forgetting, Igbinosa with the holding calls, like tough.
I've watched, I think, a half dozen probably of Ohio State's games, like in earnest.
Mm-hmm.
In and out of a lot of their games, but like a half dozen probably that I've watched almost kind of start to finish. He is the most handsy fucking defensive back I think I've ever seen at the collegiate level. He got called for, I think it was like 3 holdings against Oregon, a couple against Michigan, a couple early against Tennessee. Like, he's like Richard Sherman when Richard Sherman was at his peak in the NFL, and he just isn't getting away with it the way that Richard did in the NFL. He's super handsy. And I don't know if they're going to coach that out of him. He's going to be an NFL defensive back. I think he's athletic and physically he fits the bill to be an NFL back. They're going to have to coach some of that on him in the league because he's going to get abused by NFL receivers if he's that handsy and grabby and whatnot. It's crazy just watching how often he's just constantly like hands around the receiver and stuff. But yeah, he's going to need to clean a lot of that up for sure.
Yeah, it's not great. He didn't play his best game, but at the end of the day, the fourth quarter offense really bailed him out, right? I was a little shocked, not to keep going back to the same play, but I was a little shocked they even threw the ball on that 3rd and 11 to JJ. I guess you're trying to lull them to sleep with the quarterback runs before that to set that up. And if that's the case, then respect.
That's off of Chip Kelly.
Yeah, 100%. But that's not really what I expected them to do. I kind of thought like their offense had been a little stagnant in the second half. They had the big run, the 70-yarder from Judkins, but like I don't know. I just didn't expect that out of them. I thought they were going to kind of turtle up and rely on their defense. You know, the thought there is, man, there's no way Notre Dame goes down and scores again, right? But they didn't. They called that play, and credit to them, right? They were very, very clearly the best team on the field, top to bottom. I heard somebody go through the thought exercise of how many players on the Notre Dame roster would start on the Ohio State roster, and I think the answer was 1. Yeah. I think Jeremiah Love is probably a better running back than both of the running backs at Ohio State. But aside from that, like you might be getting maybe the like freshman left tackle.
Maybe.
Yeah. Not even Xavier Watts because they have Caleb Downs playing the same position.
Fair.
So
fair.
like
that's fair. They've got the All-American. It's not many. They'd add some depth. I mean, there's some good ball players on the team.
Yeah.
No, for sure. And how about I just want to shout out Quinshon Judkins a little bit, right? Guy who was at Ole Miss, decided he was going to transfer, and I'm also going to shout out Travion Henderson in this too, because Ryan Day went to him before they brought in Judkins and basically was like, listen, man, we're considering this. You're our guy, but we think this is going to give us an opportunity to win. And like Henderson's just like, yeah, let me sleep on a coach. And then like first thing the next morning, he's like, yep, we're good. And then he welcomes him in, makes him feel, a part of the crew. And Quinshon Judkins delivers 3 touchdowns in the national championship game for the Ohio State after transferring in this offseason. So big time for him, man. That's a hell of a way to end your collegiate career. That's a hell of a way to end kind of like calling your shot and picking where you want to go and thinking you've got the best opportunity to win a national title with Ohio State, and then delivering in the biggest moment.
Yeah, good for him, man. That's a cool story. Shout out to Henderson, like you said, Travion, Virginia kid. Love to see good things happen to those boys. Yeah,
I'm also going to shout out Quintravion Wisner from Texas for having the mashup of both of those guys' names. It's crazy to like Quinshon and Travion and Quintravion. Like there's some creative names out there for some of these parents. There's another Key and Peele skit probably in the works already. Oh, all right. Well, hey, before we move on to our way too early talk, our 2025 talk, any closing thoughts from the 2024 season?
I'm gonna kind of parlay that together, right? Sorry, my dog is. Gonna parlay that together, right? A little bit of closeout, a little bit of a way too early. There's been a common theme on the show for the last 2 seasons that I think may take a slight hit going into next year. So sort of a pour one out, sort of a RIP type deal, if you will, to the Tulane mean green wave, Tulane, whatever the
Green Wave.
Green Wave, yeah, the Green Wave.
Mean Green of North Texas.
Yeah, combining them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Quintrivia
they might need to combine.
They might. They've been a very, very profitable program for you and I, Gary. We've gone back to that well many, many times.
Yes, we have.
Through 2 different quarterbacks, right? They had Pratt, and then they had Darius, whatever his name is, who's now playing at Duke.
Yep.
I don't foresee that being the case next year, if I'm being completely honest with you. So shout out to Tulane, near and dear to my heart. I bought a lot of their gear over the last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
Mostly with the winnings I got from them. But again, combining the closeout for this year with the look ahead next year, that may not be the case for us. I may be trying to find another well to dip my bucket into.
Yeah, we might be either hoping they're going to cover some plus numbers, or we're going to be looking for a new darling belle of the ball, if you will, for our degenerate gambling desires. They've been. I mean, success, right? Success at the small level breeds that, where the bigger schools, the haves, if you will, are going to poach from the have-nots when the opportunity presents. And NIL does even the playing field to a certain amount. The portal does even the playing field to a certain amount. But when you have one of these kind of upstart small guys, there's the real possibility that coaches, players, studs, not only to graduation, not only to the draft with a few of their guys, but the portal kind of taking that freshman quarterback away was a big hit, because he looked like he was going to be a stud for them, for sure.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And not that Duke is like a have, although whatever. Maybe they're a football powerhouse. They had a better resume than Alabama this year, if you trust the graphics.
Well, Alabama beat South Carolina this year.
Well, fair. That's all you need to know.
No one in the ACC did that.
Nobody
in the ACC did that. Just saying.
Nope.
I know all roads lead back to one place on this show for me specifically.
Oh yeah, we're heading to Cola.
So if that's the case, just keeping in tradition, I would like to shout out the University of South Carolina Gamecocks for giving me one of the most electric college football seasons that I can remember. I've been a fan of this team for 16 seasons now. They obviously were at a very high point when I came in, because Steve Spurrier was there. Stephen Garcia, Alshon Jeffrey, Marcus Lattimore, Ace Sanders. Like, the list goes on and on of all the Gamecock legends that were playing there for my early part of the fandom. And then it got real dark. Spurrier left. Will Muschamp came in. Is dark times in Columbia. And then we hired Shane Beamer, and it's like, oh man, this is gonna be super cool, right? Like, I know the name Beamer. That's a name. He was on staff with Steve Spurrier there as like a recruiting coordinator and special teams guy. And then we brought in Spencer Rattler, and it was like, oh my God, like, this is cool. Like, that's a guy that everybody knows, right? Everybody in the country knew who Spencer Rattler was because his TV show as a senior in high school.
Yeah, and then he went to Elite 11 where he was fucking showing his whole ass.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And then we beat Tennessee, and he threw 6 touchdowns. And then we beat Clemson in Clemson. And it's like, oh my, what the fuck, dude? What is happening? And then this year happens. We have a homegrown quarterback from right up the road in Florence. We bring in Kyle Kennard, the Bronco Nagurski Award winner. We bring in Dylan Stewart, a true freshman, 5-star kid. best 5-star or best freshman in the country, in my opinion. The guys in Austin might have something to say about that. Maybe the kids over in Minnesota with Coy Perch, their safety. Regardless, 3 of the best freshmen in the entire country. Dylan Stewart is one of them. He's actually number 10 on ESPN's top 100 college football players going into next season, but whatever. So I just shout out the Gamecocks, dude. This was an absolutely electric season, winning 9 games. Like, that's never in a million years. I don't think we talked about it before the season, right? I did not expect this out of them. I don't know. It was crazy. It was a very emotional year for me in college football because I do love it so much. I know it was a crazy season for you because Syracuse was electric on the offensive side of the ball too, right? Like,
so Cal McCord set an ACC fucking record.
Yeah, man.
Like, crazy, man, crazy. And honestly, like, one fucking egg laid 2 eggs this year. Just one of them, if you didn't lay the egg, this might have been a fringe fucking playoff team.
Yeah. Crazy. We could have been in the exact same boat, like trying to vie for our teams to make.
We could have been watching Syracuse and Charlotte.
We could have. We probably should have been watching Miami, but we could have been watching Syracuse. Yeah. Oh, just an awesome year all around. Diego Pavia came to the SEC. We got to see DJ Lagway, the Manning kids playing. The Ashton Jetty season, like,
oh my god, yeah.
Iowa was hitting overs this year.
Right. Where did that come from?
I don't know, man. We got to see a Jew play football at a Mormon school.
Right.
Like, a wild season. The Navy coach goes out to San Jose State and has a Triple Crown winner for at receiver. Like,
has the most wild air raid offense.
Yeah, man. Fucking Shador Sanders, Travis Hunter.
Yeah.
At Arizona State with Cam Scatteraboo, they won the Big 12.
Like, won the Big 12.
Yeah. We might get Cam Rising back next year. I mean,
dude's going to be collecting Social Security and playing college football.
Yeah. Just an all-around wild season.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, good fun. Yeah, I want to shout out Fran Brown for bringing relevant football to the Syracuse Orange late in the season. Honestly, and as I mentioned, like, just don't lose to Stanford, don't throw 5 picks against Pittsburgh, like one of those two, and this legitimately could have been a team in the ACC championship game. And as we saw, both ACC teams made the playoff, so this very well could have been a fringe playoff team if one of those games hadn't gone the way that it went. So it's fun. It's going to be a big challenge next year because as I told you, the reason I thought Syracuse could have a good year is because of the schedule. The schedule ain't that fucking favorable next year. They got Notre Dame and Tennessee in the non-conference. They play 4 playoff teams next year and Miami. So really like 4.5 playoff teams next year from this season. So they've got Tennessee and Notre Dame in the non-conference. SMU and Clemson are on their schedule next year in the ACC, and they get Miami and of course the rest of the ACC schedule. But and they're probably going to be starting a true freshman at quarterback. However, Fran Brown did do pretty well in the portal. 55th nationally when it comes to recruiting, and it's Central New York, so that's pretty good. But decent recruiting class coming in, and a name for everybody to kind of listen for next year is a guy who transferred out of Georgia to Syracuse, wide receiver with just explosive speed. Needs to work a little bit on the hands and the route running. Is not a complete wide receiver, but he can kind of disappear on you. A guy named Zeed Haynes. A little bit down the roster this year, but he hit some explosive plays. With the departure of Gadsden and the Pena, I believe Pena is departing as well. He's was kind of the top guy this year, but Zeed Haynes could be a guy that I'm going to pay attention to next year for Syracuse. If Syracuse's offense is going to be good, it's probably going to be because they've got some explosive plays out of him. But yeah, awesome job by Fran. But you hit it on the head. Crazy season, season. A lot of interesting stuff. Bama with their struggles, and just a weird season from Jalen Milroe. Didn't expect that. Michigan not being able to score any points, but still, bless you, still beating Ohio State. USC, Lincoln Riley is coming back.
Yeah.
Don't know how that happened. Florida State, both coaches survived there after the disastrous starts. And I'm not going to spoil anything for the next segment, but there might be a juggernaut in Gainesville next year. So,
have you looked at their schedule?
It's not what it was this year. Still not great though. Still not great. Still not great. Is there an easy schedule in the SEC? I'd love to see it.
I have a candidate for you, but
I know Georgia had a kind of a softball this year.
Well, we can talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
We got plenty of time to talk about the upcoming year.
Yeah. I'm double checking on Trevor Pena because I know he was kind of tossed in the air. It looks like he's actually going to be back, so we might be able to absorb some of the blow from especially losing Gadsden and McCord. But starting a freshman quarterback is going to be a little bit of a challenge. But arrow up in Syracuse for sure with Fran Brown and what he brought to the table.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, hey, let's switch gears, man. Let's start talking way too early. Maybe it's just never too early. I don't know. But way too early projection for next year. On3's top 25 goes as follows. Your top 5, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Georgia, Oregon, Clemson, LSU, BYU, and South Carolina round out the top 10. I'm not going to bore you with my voice reading all 25, but that's your top 10. You see playoff teams still in. We've got Arizona State, Indiana, Tennessee. Iowa State was a fringe playoff team. And then, Miami, Boise State remaining in the top 25, even though they're losing Ashton Jeanty and all of his explosiveness. So let's discuss this a little bit, man. Let's start with in the top 10. So every year, top 25, you mentioned it before the show, top 25 projection looks very, very different than the end of the season. Injuries and things you don't expect happen. Guys underperform, other guys overperform. So let's talk about it. Inside the top 10, give me a team, and we'll kind of go back and forth here, a team or two, but give me a team that you think that sits in the top 10 right now that in 2025 you might find that they're either outside the top 10 or maybe even outside the top 25.
Sure. My instant pick is just Clemson. Why is Clemson inside the top 10? They got boat raced in all of their important games this year outside of the ACC championship. I guess Carolina didn't boat race them, but we beat them in the quote Death Valley Stadium. That's not where I'm going to go, and I've tried to do as much due diligence as I can to find these schedules. Big 12 schedule is not out yet. You got Big 10, you got SEC. I have not found a Big 12 schedule. I'm gonna go.
They should be. I think within the next. I think the next few days, the Big 12 schedules should be coming out.
All right. Well, I'm gonna take the low hanging fruit here then, and I'm just gonna say BYU. I know Jake Retzlaff is back, and I really kind of struggled here, if I'm being honest, between two teams that I'm looking at in the top 10 that I think will finish the year outside of it. But I'm gonna go BYU. They're closest to outside the top 10. Than the other team I was looking at. And they kind of caught us by surprise this year, right? It was a little bit of like a catching lightning in a bottle season from Retzlaff. They snuck out some wins that they probably should not have gotten. Thinking the Utah game specifically. They will be a good team. I would imagine they're going to finish in the top 25 next year. If they're outside of the top 10, though, it would not shock me.
Yeah. I'm gonna agree with you. We're gonna get some variance here in a moment, but I'm gonna agree with you on BYU. They were one that I kind of pinpointed immediately as I don't know if they're gonna be able to maintain the kind of win against all odds that they had this year. You mentioned it, caught us by surprise. I agree. I think Retzlaff, what he brings to the table is good for a college football team, but outside of him, we saw it late in the season with them where they really struggled to move the ball at times, and then they'd get hot and find ways to move the ball. I look at it and I don't know if they're going to be able to score with their Big 12 schedule. They do have a layup in the non-conference. All three of their non-conference should be layups for this team. They play Portland State, Stanford, and East Carolina. In order, their Big 12 opponents are decided. They avoid Arizona State, but I look at their schedule and like I think Utah is going to be fine again. It's in Provo. I think, yeah. So that'll be a home game for them. But
do you have the Big 12 schedule?
No, it's their opponents are lined up. Not the schedule
okay.
is not released. But so they avoid Arizona State. I expect West Virginia to be back up. Maybe not instantly, but I think Rich Rod's going to get them back up. I don't think TCU is going to be down the way they were this year. They've got Colorado. They've got Iowa State. I don't know that they're going to finish in the top 10 if they've got 2 losses in the Big 12 or 3. And I expect they're going to be a little less fortuitous with some of the lucky bounces or fortuitous bounces they got this year. I don't see them being able to maintain. There's always like regression to the mean is a big term that I like to use when you see these flash in the pan teams. I expect a bit of regression to the mean for BYU. I wouldn't even be surprised if they finish outside the top 25 next year. With just the way their schedule lines up. They don't have a good non-conference schedule to lean on. So they're not going to have feathers in their cap when they get to Big 12 play. And if they drop 2 or 3 games in the Big 12, I think it's going to sink their boat really when it comes to the rankings and just the the eyeball test, if you will. What's another team? You got another one in the top 10, you think?
So, yeah, I have a hard time envisioning Notre Dame being a top 10 team next year. And this is my only qualifying statement for my justification here, is that I don't know who's playing quarterback for them.
Yep.
Is it going to be Angeli, the kid that came in against Georgia? Are we going to get a full season of him? I don't know. Probably, but I don't know that to be the case for certain. Look, saying that a team is not going to be top 10 in the country means they're probably going to be like 9-3, which is a very good season. You know what I mean? Especially for a team that just played in a national title game. We don't often, outside of like your Nick Sabans or your Kirby Smarts, we don't often see teams repeat that same level of success year over year. Now, maybe Marcus Freeman becomes a coach in that same conversation. He's got some work to do. He's got to win a national title, right, to join that group. But I just don't know. I don't know. I expect their offense to be very run heavy once again. I expect their defense to be very good once again. But, I don't know who's playing quarterback for them, so I can't speak to the identity of that team. And Michigan is going to be better next year. I expect Southern Cal to be better next year. They're going to play an ACC schedule. I think there will be some ACC teams that are probably decent next year. I don't know. It's going to be – I don't see it. They're 4 right now. That's a respect thing for them having just made it to the national title game. But, honestly, they could have lost to Georgia. They could have lost to Penn State. They got a little bit lucky going through the playoff. 4 feels really high for me.
Yeah. I can agree with. I think I could agree with you on Notre Dame. I just took a look at their planned opponents next year. They got A&M at home. They got Boise State at home, and then it's really is USC going to be better? Is Navy going to be as good and be able to actually compete with them next year? I see possibly 10 wins on their schedule, and if they've got 10 wins, I think they'll be in the top 10. But
they have to go to Arkansas.
They do have to go to Arkansas, which could be a stumbling block. They are let's see, they're in Pitt. Pitt can be tough at home sometimes. There's some opportunity for them to trip. If they have 3 losses, I think they're outside the top 10 for sure. I don't think they're a team that with that schedule is going to survive 3 losses and be in the top 10 like some of the SEC schools can. Another team for me. This team is very Jekyll and Hyde for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I just don't know. I don't know what we're going to get yet. I don't know how Sark is going to handle the offense next year with the change in style from Ewers to Arch Manning, and I don't know how they're going to reload with a lot of the talent that they're losing to the NFL. Bond and Golden are gone on the outside, and I know at times Bond was on a milk carton this year, but Golden was a big deal for them. They didn't really reload with names in the portal at wide receiver. The offensive line is going to be very young next year, and they lost some studs on defense as well. However, Texas certainly should be one of those factories that can reload. When Texas is up, the state of Texas is so rich with talent. I trust Arch, but I also don't know what we're going to get because in the sample sizes that we saw this year, it felt like Sark wasn't really sure how to call plays with Arch in the game. Now, certainly could be that he just had this kind of mental game plan for the entire season with Quinn Ewers and how he was going to attack the game with Ewers. But if there is a disconnect between Sark and Arch in terms of best usage, I think Texas could end up outside the top 10. I'm going to caveat that with I could be so wrong on this that Texas goes and wins a national championship next year, right? I just feel like this team has the potential to be very, very Jekyll and Hyde next year. And I could see Texas just losing a couple of games that you wouldn't expect them to lose. And it's hard to absorb losing multiple games and stay in the top 10.
Sure. I understand. I hear the points you're making, and I understand like the sentiment there. I feel very differently about Texas's projection next year. Ryan Wingo fills right into that number one receiver slot for me, who's a true freshman this year. I feel pretty good about him going forward. Feel pretty confident in their quarterback situation going forward. If anything gives me a little bit of pause, it's the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
But it's Texas and Steve Sarkisian. They're going to figure it out, whether that line is, 2-3 NFL guys deep like it was this year. They're going to have a more mobile quarterback next year in Arch Manning. I'm not going to jump the gun here with our future predictions, but I feel very differently about Texas's projection next year than you do.
Yeah, for sure. I like I said, this team I feel like is going to be very it's either going to gel and it's going to be great and they go win a national championship. Full disclosure, I told Raul the day that they signed Arch Manning that they were going to win a national title while he was there. So I feel very bullish about Arch Manning and who he is and who he can be at Texas. I also looked at their schedule. Their schedule is not a fun ride. They are at Ohio State to start the season.
Yep.
Then they get their layup non-conference with San Jose State, UTEP, and Sam Houston. But then they go to Gainesville, and we've talked about who DJ Lagway is. They've got Oklahoma at a neutral site. We don't know what Oklahoma's going to be, but that's a rivalry game. They're at Mississippi State, at Kentucky. We know Kentucky can play it tough. And they're at Georgia. And then they close the season with their rivalry game against Texas A&M at home, but A&M is a top 25 team preseason, or at least way too early preseason top 25. So that schedule isn't great. If they stumble out the gate in Columbus, is the non-conference enough for them to get it ramped back up before they have to go to Gainesville? It is not an easy SEC schedule for them on top of opening the season at Columbus. If they win that game in Columbus to start the season, I promise you, my outlook will go back to what I told Raul, that Texas is going to win a national championship while Arch is there. It's just the schedule is tough, and I just didn't love what I saw, the choppy offense from Sark when Arch was in this year. Now, full off season, Sark could certainly figure this thing out, and they go 15-0 and win a national championship. It certainly could be possible. Yeah, maybe, right? I mean, he hasn't had a lot of starting time in college. Whether he's going to be able to kind of, stay consistent and stay steady all season. He brings a different element that Ewers doesn't, though. He can escape. So if that offensive line does struggle, he can escape and make plays with his feet.
Gary, you said you went over the Texas schedule. I also just went over the Texas schedule, and there's one team that's on this graphic that was not listed on the Texas schedule. It's a team that's currently in the preseason top 10.
I've actually noticed that. So I'm on FB schedules. Mm-hmm. They didn't have the Michigan game for Notre Dame either. They do play South Carolina, though. Are they in Cola?
Texas does not play South Carolina next year.
Who is it that they play this on this then?
No, I'm saying there's a team that is not on their schedule.
Oh, that is not
on there's a team on this list that is not on their schedule.
Not on their schedule, yeah. Yeah.
They
avoid
the Lenore Sellers. They avoid him.
Yeah,
running scared.
Notre Dame only had 11 games on this site, so it's a little shoddy, so bear with me.
No, I just think it's interesting,
Your
points would have, in my mind, I'm by no means saying that you're incorrect, but in my mind, your points would have been much more validated if they were playing a team like South Carolina. A real stumbling block in their road to perfection.
Like a real gauntlet. Spurs up. Yeah, I think you get a year under his belt if Arch is willing to stay there all 4 years. You get a year under his belt. 2026 could certainly be a huge year. You love to see a guy get, that starting time under their belt for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Any others in the top 10 you want to highlight as maybe at risk of falling out? I think we're in agreement. Clemson is a strange entry in the top 10, but anybody else you want to highlight?
Yeah, I mean, I get why Clemson is there, right? Like their defense. We said this multiple times last year. Their defense was not the problem in Death Valley, and bringing back Cade Klubnik for another year. This will be his third year starting. Like that just breeds consistency, right? Like I assume he gets better year over year. He's probably not going to get worse. Excuse me. And they already made the playoff, right? Whether they deserved or not, whatever.
Sure.
But I understand why they are as high on this list as they are. Oregon has a ton of talent. They're going to be super good next year. Once again, I don't know who's going to. I assume Dante Moore is going to be playing quarterback for them. They had a 5-star kid decommit during the playoffs. I guess it's going to be Dante Moore. That's my assumption is who's playing quarterback for them. Penn State, to your dad's point earlier, and or to your dad's question and what you said about them earlier, they're going to be really good on offense. That offensive line is going to be nasty. They're going to be able to run the ball on anybody they want. I have no idea if they're going to be able to throw the ball.
Yeah.
That's because Tyler Warren's gone. Drew Aller's back, but is he going to be able to carry an offense? He's not going to have to, but is he going to be able to if needed? I don't know. I'm a little, and I like LSU. I said this to you, and I've said it to a couple guys who asked me my thoughts on the quarterbacks coming out. I thought he might come out this year, but he obviously is coming back. But Garrett Nussmeier threw with the most anticipation of any quarterback I watched in college football next year. He has the arm to make every throw. He's a little more mobile than people give him credit for. So I expect a big season out of Garrett Nussmeier next year. I think the top 10 is fine.
Yeah. No, I agree. For the most part, other than the ones we highlighted, I think it's fine. So let's shift. Let's talk those bottom 3 rows or maybe even someone off the board that you think is going to surprise everybody and overachieve and finish inside the top 10. Who you got?
I'm going to be talking out of both sides of my mouth here just slightly. Except that I know who is playing quarterback for this team. It's going to be Austin Simmons. I'm talking about Ole Miss here, right? The freshman Austin Simmons we saw play for Jackson Dart in spurts last year. I'm going to go back to the Ole Miss well. This was a team that you and I both locked into the playoff in our preseason show. I'm going to go back to with Lane Kiffin, man. This Ole Miss schedule is about as easy as it gets in the SEC. They go to Georgia. That's probably the toughest game on their schedule. They play at home versus South Carolina. They get Florida at home, and then their Egg Bowl is on the road, but whatever, it's Mississippi State. their early season schedule is like they're going to be 4-0, right? They get Georgia State, Kentucky, Arkansas, Tulane. They're going to be 4-0 going into an LSU game that they host in Oxford this year. Like I think the schedule lines up for them unless they shit the bed in any one of these games that they like. I'm assuming they're going to be favored in just about all of them except 3, right? Like LSU, Georgia, South Carolina. You could talk me into the Florida game. Maybe Florida's favorite depending on how their season breaks down. But like I understand that they lost a ton of talent, right? They're basically their entire receiver room is gone. But I think Lane Kiffin is capable of calling a potent offense basically no matter the personnel on the field, so long as he has a quarterback capable of running it. And Austin Simmons, I thought playing in spurts last year showed me signs that he's ready to be a college quarterback.
Yeah. I like the logic there. I think the schedule breaks very favorably for them. Making a couple of assumptions in terms of like where teams will be when they play them. I really will be interested to see how the quarterback position plays out because I think they've got another young and his name's eluding me, but I think there's going to be some competition in the quarterback room next year.
Caden Davis? No, Walker Howard. So you're talking about?
Yeah, I think that might be it. But I think there's going to be some competition potentially. I do think that, it'll I'm sure it'll be settled and Lane Kiffin will be just fine. I like Ole Miss's schedule though. It's very, very favorable. I think you're absolutely right about that in terms of the games they get at home versus the games they have on the road. I'm gonna go. I'm going right smack dab in the middle at number 18. I really like what Florida brought back. I know the schedule is tough. However, I'll counter that just a touch with the fact that they get Texas at home, they get Georgia at home, and they get Tennessee at home. So 3 of their tough gauntlet games are at home. LSU is going to be tough. If you told me that's not a night game, I don't feel as bad about it, right? Because it's LSU during the day. Also, Brian Kelly, career underachiever. I do love the talent that LSU's got coming back. You mentioned Garrett Nussmeier. I think he's going to get some run as the number 1 quarterback, the number 1 pick next year, potentially in the NFL draft for the exact reason you talked about. I think he's a guy who just he processes well and throws with anticipation. But this Florida team is returning a lot of talent. DJ Lagway, we've talked about it. We're very high on him. I look at it, and Eugene Wilson is coming back. He's maybe the most explosive player in the country next year. He's going to be on a lot of highlight reels if Florida's winning games. And I think that this past season, what they endured is going to harden this team and gel this team around, especially rally them around Billy Napier going into next season. And I think Florida has potential to be a surprise team here to break into the top 10.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all. I knew you were going to go there, so I went somewhere else. Figured I'd give you the floor. It was well said. DJ Lagway, that kid is a freaking alien, dude. He's going to be incredible. Yeah, I think Florida arrow all the way up, and it could not have been any more down after like 2 weeks of this past season. But you said it so many times this year. Their schedule was just an absolute knockout gauntlet, and they finished hot, man. Like they finished really, really well, and that's a team that like you feel pretty good about the future going forward there. I think. So I got another one for you, and then I will cede the floor. I think SMU is going to be really good next year. They're bringing their quarterback back in Jennings, Brett Ratley, what's the coach's name? Brett something, starts from the L.
But I can't think of it either.
Hold on, I can tell you. Give me 2 seconds. Their coach's name is Rhett Lashley. Not Brett. Rhett Lashley.
Yeah.
They currently have the 15th highest ranked transfer portal season or whatever you want to call it that.
That Pony Express, baby.
Yeah, according to On3, they also have the largest NIL collective in terms of money in the country. They have more money than any school in the country to pay their players. More than A&M, more than Texas, more than Ohio State, more than Georgia, more than Notre Dame. SMU has the most money.
Eric Dickerson just drove up in his gold Corvette.
Yeah, right? They also play in the ACC.
Yes.
Miami down next year, in my opinion. They'll be fine, but they're not going to be as good as they were this year.
Yep.
Clemson, they will also be fine next year. Syracuse, probably not going to be as good. I don't know. Jury's still out. We'll see. Louisville, they were highly ranked last year coming into the season as well, and we saw what happened to them.
Yeah.
So they will be in the running to win the ACC next season. They're going to be better than they were last year, in my opinion. I think we could see them finish as a top 10 team and an ACC champion.
I'll go farther than that because SMU is a team that I was very, very high on as well. If you hadn't covered them here, I probably was going to cover them next. Their schedule, they could be undefeated ACC champion, maybe number 2 seed in the playoff next year, like legitimately, because I love what they brought back. I love what they picked up in the portal. You mentioned they've got a top 15 portal class, and they just Kevin Jennings is electric. We talked a lot about him this year. I think he's going to be even better with another year under his belt in this offense. But that schedule breaks so favorably for them. If they can get by Clemson in Death Valley, I just don't see a game on their schedule that I look at and say that's the one they're going to drop. Their non-conferences kind of layups with the exception of TCU. If maybe TCU's back up next year, that could be a little bit of a stumbling block. But other than that, they've got Louisville at home. They've got Miami at home. Even if Syracuse is still up next year, they've got Syracuse at home. They've got a really, really favorable schedule in terms of where things align for them. And the ACC, you and I have talked about it. The ACC is never really a football powerhouse. Clemson in Death Valley is the one game I look at that if they get past that, I would not be surprised if SMU was an undefeated ACC champion and probably sitting at number 2 when it comes to playoff seeding.
Yeah, I agree. I
like them a lot next year, and the schedule is just beautiful for them, in my opinion. All right. Well, I'm looking at Michigan. I don't think they're going to be a team that's going to compete for a national championship. However, I think they could be a fringe top 10 team. I could see them finishing the season somewhere between 8, 9, and 10, just because the defense is going to still be very, very good. The offensive line is still going to be very, very good. I am putting a lot of trust in Bryce Underwood. I know that it's a stretch to ask a freshman to come in and just change everything right away. He's a local kid, so he's got that in his favor. He's a 5-star plus guy who was being recruited by LSU, flipped from LSU because Dave Portnoy and company decided they wanted to pay him a bunch of money. And they got that tech guy, I forget his name, but he came in and put some money in as well. I'm putting a lot of faith in Bryce Underwood, and I'm going to say this knowing very well that this could be a very bad Michigan team again next year because they don't have explosive players on the outside. I'm trusting Bryce Underwood's feet and their ability to run the ball and play very, very good defense in a Big Ten that I think is going to be one and everybody else in the Big Ten next year, unless Penn State can really take that next step. It's like Ohio State and everybody else, I think, next year.
Oregon?
I don't know what Oregon's going to look like next year. They're at quarterback, like
I
don't know.
Look, I get so many things wrong that you're probably correct.
No, I get plenty of things wrong. I just like, what are they going to look like at quarterback next year? That's my question with Oregon. I think Ohio State's going to be a class of the Big Ten next year. unless Penn State can take that next step, and I just don't trust James Franklin to do so. I think they're going to be very talented. I think Michigan's going to have a lot of gettable games next year in the Big Ten, and I could see them at being at like 10-2 at the end of the season and finishing somewhere in that 8, 9, 10 range.
Yeah, I hope that you're wrong because I hate Michigan.
I'm not a big Michigan guy either, but
yeah. I said I had one last one, and it was SMU, but I actually have another one. Yeah. I won't go as long on this one. This was a team that I was super high on last year. When I went back and found that clip of me picking Ohio State, also listened to like a little bit of our conference champions. This was a team that I picked to be like a co-champion. I had said that one of their games was going to decide the season, and I was wrong because that game did not decide who was going to win the Big 12. I'm in on K-State next year.
Ooh,
Avery Johnson coming back for one more season. Playing in a Little Apple. That kid was absolutely electric in spurts last year. So give me K-State. They could sneak in. We're a long way from the show where we pick conference champions, but I may be picking them to win the Big 12 next year.
A little heads up for everybody.
Yeah, but we'll find out.
Yeah.
I just like Avery Johnson, that's all.
Last point I didn't make about Michigan that I forgot to make. The other thing is their schedule is fucking absurdly easy next year. Like they have maybe the biggest layup of a Power 5 school next year. They literally only play Ohio State in the Big Ten. Their Big Ten schedule is Maryland, Northwestern, Purdue, Michigan State, Washington, USC, and Wisconsin next year. And they've got Wisconsin at home. I know Camp Randall can be tough. They've got Wisconsin at home. Their non-conference is New Mexico, Oklahoma, Central Michigan, and Nebraska. Now, if Oklahoma or Nebraska are up next year, they could be stumbling blocks. But that schedule for Michigan, you could be very, very bad on offense and still win 9 games with that schedule next year. So if they're just good, above average on offense, I think that's a 10-win team with that schedule. And I think a 10-win Michigan team is a top 10 team. I
think they lose to Nebraska next year.
Okay. If they lose to Nebraska, I'm going to be wrong about this because I'm counting on 4 non-conference wins and give me wiggle room to lose maybe at USC and then lose to Ohio State next year and be a 10-win team. If they lose to Nebraska, I'm going to be wrong about this.
Well, if they were truly wanting to contend, they would have put South Carolina on their schedule, but they didn't. So
yeah, that's fair. That's
running
fair.
Scared.
Yeah,
classic.
Notre Dame and Michigan do not play next year. I forgot about that. Notre Dame took Michigan off their schedule, and I remember that being a thing. I've got a group chat with some Notre Dame and some Michigan fans, and I remember that being a thing that they went back and forth about. That Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame broke the agreement that they had that they were going to, because they've played like every year for a long time. I think Notre Dame is the one that broke that. And I don't remember. I think it was when they decided they were going to play an ACC heavier schedule. But I can't say that for sure. But I remember the Notre Dame fan or the Michigan fan giving the Notre Dame fans a bunch of flack for it, for wanting to schedule more cupcakes. So yeah, I just noticing that now Notre Dame is not on Michigan's schedule. So, yeah, even more of a softer schedule for Michigan next year though.
Must be nice playing them easy schedules.
Yeah, I'm looking at some of these ACC schools going over, like looking at kind of this to try to gauge like who I thought. There aren't really any. Ole Miss is probably the closest when it comes to saying like, here's your softball schedule in the SEC. Georgia had a bit of that this past year. They don't have that next year in terms of that kind of same softball, but there's, especially in the SEC, like the top part of the SEC, like you're going to mangle each other. Those big dogs, kind of like what we're seeing in the basketball season right now with the SEC teams too.
Yeah, and then there's Duke just kind of hanging out in the ACC, just winning games.
Yep, just hanging out. Speaking of Duke,
Oh,
I think that Duke, in a very down year for the ACC next year, has a chance to maybe finish second or third in the ACC. I'm not picking them to be a playoff team, not picking them to be a top 10 team, but I think Duke has an opportunity to sniff potentially playing in the ACC championship game. The opportunity to go lose to SMU in the ACC championship game next year.
Derry Mensa is the
Mensa.
last name.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
it's Darian
Darius.
Darian.
Yeah. Darian Mensa. Darius Mensa. Yeah. They've done a pretty good job
Darian.
there. Yeah. Darian Mensa. They've done a pretty good job there. Starting to make some noise football, and the ACC is down next year. Like you mentioned Miami. I don't think Miami finishes in the top 25. I don't know if Clemson finishes in the top 15. It's going to be a very gettable ACC next year for whoever wants to finish second.
Yeah. Let's go Ponies.
Let's go Ponies.
Very talented student body.
This is what they do in SMU. The pony. I guess this is the ears of the horse.
Yeah, it was saw a lot of that in Charlotte.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's time to put each other on the spot here. So we are 361 or something like that days away from next year's national championship game. Let's make a pick. You want to go first? Give me your way too early national champion for the 2025 or 2026 college football playoff. Yeah, hook him.
Hook him.
Raul will be proud. I'll let him know when we get on for Blitz. I don't think he's tuned in right now, but I'll let him know.
Colin Simmons, Ryan Wingo, Arch Manning. Welcome, baby. Subject to change come August.
For sure. Yeah, I don't hate that, and I'm going to stand on the fact that I think that Texas is they're going to be one of two. I think they're either going to be national champion, or I think they're going to be a team that struggles and loses 3 or 4 games, and ends up kind of outside of, maybe even outside of the college football playoff. They've got a lot of talent. They lost a lot of talent. Wingo is going to be a big X factor for them. I think he's electric with the ball in his hands. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if he's going to be the guy that's going to be able to run routes and create separation for them. If he proves to be that, then I think him and Arch are going to fucking light shit up next year.
Yep.
They are returning some talent in the backfield. It is going to be interesting to see what they do on the offensive line, but I don't hate that pick. I think that it has a very, very good chance of hitting for sure. I wanted very badly to put the Spurs up and pick your team, but I'm not going to put that voodoo black magic on your team.
Wait, why did you want to pick South Carolina?
I think they are one of the 2 most talented teams in the SEC. I think it's them, and I look at Alabama probably as the other team that I think is kind of a complete team in terms of talent. South Carolina has talent where they need it, and it's that defensive front. I think is going to be monsters next year. I think everybody's going to know who Dylan Stewart is by the end of next year if they don't already know. I think one more year under his belt, one more offseason for Lenora Sellers. I think he's going to be a guy next year who wins games that South Carolina might not have traditionally won. So I expect South Carolina to stay right here in the top 10. I expect South Carolina to be competing and flirting with the possibility of playing in the SEC title game next year. But I see them as a top 12 team. And honestly, you get into the playoff, you got a chance. And when you've got a quarterback that can make plays and you got a defensive line that can get after the quarterback, you can make a lot of fucking noise. One thing they really, really need next year is, I don't care who it is, if it's Nick Harbor or if it's someone else on the roster that steps up, they absolutely positively need a guy that on 3rd and 7 can just go win and get them a first down, or a guy that can just make that big play when they really need it. Momentum swing after a turnover, a guy I can send down the field and I'm going to hit a big play with him. If it's Nick Harbor, great. If it's somebody else, great. I think Nick Harbor has the physical tools to be that guy. However, I'm going to go a little bit farther down the board. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he's got to make more catches. I'm going to go to the well a second time, and I'm going to Gainesville. I'm all in. I'm all in, and I know that I'm probably by fucking September 14th, I'm going to be fucking wondering why I did it. I think what Florida has next year is a very, very good defense, which we saw play lights out football down the stretch of this season. And they've got maybe the most explosive playmaker in college football in Eugene Wilson. And I think DJ Lagway is a guy that got a season under his belt. No more questions about him being the guy. It's fucking 8:52 p.m. on the East Coast. And anybody else that they ever want to bring into Florida is not as good as DJ Lagway. Just let him play and let him go. The schedule, again, like I said, I think the games that they got at home are going to be manageable in the SEC. They may not play in the SEC title game, but this team, any given Saturday or Wednesday when the playoff comes around, I think they can compete. And I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to put a ticket in way too early, just because I know I'm going to get a lot of juice for it. And I'm going to hopefully watch it tick upward as the payout goes up. But I'm on the Gators bandwagon next year. I like the medal that this team can have if they rally around what this season was for them. They were basically just taken behind the woodshed in Old Yellard on like October 1st, and nobody wanted to hear from them again the rest of the season. But I'll tell you what, the team that was on the field for the Gators in the last 4 weeks of the season, nobody wanted to play them.
Yeah.
So give me that as a momentum builder for next year. And I'm going to go way out on a very, very thin limb. And I'm going to take Florida as my way too early national champion. And I absolutely, like you did, I reserve the right to change that before August.
All right, let me toss you one real quick because I know you got to run. There's a team not on our graphic, a team that neither of us mentioned when, honestly, I should have when we were talking about teams that could jump up and surprise folks. Yeah. This is a team that you may have been just one calendar year early on. As the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah.
They have the best wide receiver room in the SEC with Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton coming over. Well, Cam Coleman was already there. He'll be a sophomore, and then Eric Singleton coming over from Georgia Tech. People will remember him from that Georgia game where him and Haynes King were basically the entire offense down the stretch.
Yep.
He's like a do-it-all gadget wide receiver that just gets open and catches balls. They brought in Jackson Arnold. I'm not saying they're going to be great, but that's a team. We have seen Hugh Freeze when he has talented offensive players.
There's pieces.
There are pieces there. Watch out for Auburn.
Yeah.
Their schedule not that bad too.
No, it's not. It's
not that terrible.
No. I kind of burnt myself with picking them this year. I guess I should have saved it for.
Yeah. You were just way ahead of the game. That's
way ahead of the game. Way ahead of the game. All right, bud. Well, hey, appreciate you joining. Appreciate the viewers out there with the flexibility for this week. It's been a hectic week for everybody here at Backyard Sports. But stick around 5 minutes. We got the Blitz. But appreciate you tuning in one more time for Tailgate Trash Talk to close out the 2024 season. Stay tuned. We're going to make announcements on the page in terms of how we're going to build out some off-season content. Going to try to stay more active this off-season than we did last year. Try to come up with some interesting topics because unlike the NFL, college football doesn't have like free agency and the draft and all these other things that really dominate the news cycle. We're going to try to get creative with some content, show you guys some appreciation as well for sticking around for the whole season. And again, we are excited for the 2025 season. But man, what a ride 2024 was. For Bentley and everybody else here at Backyard Sports, this has been Tailgate Trash Talk, brought to you by Backyard Sports. We are